So for those who are joining us, program planning and evaluation, we love to extract data from you. And so I thought I'd start off the meeting extracting your favorite key brands and recommendations. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I already got some good ones. I love Pandan. So if you're in the chat, and we're going to go ahead and get started, but if you'd like to continue to write in your recommendations, I'm specifically looking for a black tea. Anyway, so I'll turn it over to Mark to get it started.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and hopefully everyone's having a wonderful week, and welcome to today's training. I'm going to just give you a couple of slides here to introduce everyone now that you've had all your good tea and you're ready to go for the day. The desired outcomes. So why are we here today? What do we want to get out of this? Participants will have, after today, an understanding of the structure of project board. Most of you already probably have a pretty good grasp on project board, but those of you that don't will have an understanding of how it's structured. Experience with interacting with new project board reporting checklists. So we'll give you a little bit of training here, so you'll be able to go forward with your own reporting. Understanding of UCCE academics examples, best practices, and lessons learned for contact reporting and project board. So we'll give you some great examples from your colleagues and some of the missteps they may have had and how we learned from those missteps and pushed on forward and learned from others. Next slide, Kit. So what's the purpose of Project Board? Okay, Project Board was created for UC&R as a reporting system that aims to reduce duplicative data entry effort. So instead of having to enter things over and over again for various reasons, we have one system for doing all that, and also make data accessible for multiple purposes. So once you get your reporting data entered, it's available to use for numerous things that leadership and program planning and other parts of the organization will need for our various types of reporting purposes, and also for making decisions on resource allocations. It replaced DANRIS-X, CASA, and Academic Online Program Review, which all were before I got here. So those are just names to me, but that's what Project Board has replaced. Designed to manage information for the following purposes: academic merit and promotion, which most of you think is probably the most important reason they use Project Board. Accountability. We have to show all the various organizations out there, like the federal government and the state, that their money that they're giving us is being used wisely. And advocacy efforts, which is also an important part of the data, because we want to make, again, certain that the elected officials out there that are responsible for spending the taxpayers' money, that they realize all the great things that we are doing, and that their money is being used really wisely when it's given to UC&R. Next slide, please. So what's the timeline for all this? Academics with A&R merit and promotion processes. So those of you that are going for a merit or promotion this year, Project Board is open all year. So you can access Project Board any time of the year except for random times that that's being worked on. And it records the information for multiple years. So this is a running log of all the information that you have entered into it since the beginning of Project Board. In November, that's when you begin compiling your academic evaluation, your merit and promotion packages, and it is November. February 1st of 2021, It's a due date for Project Board. So all of you are probably starting to work on it. Certainly there'll be a few of you that don't get to it till late January, but that is the deadline. It is the deadline every year, February 1st. So you want to have everything updated for all of the work you've done up to that point on February 1, so that we can move forward with the merit and promotion process in a timely fashion. Academics with campus merit and promotion, so those specialists that are based on campus, they have a completely different timeline. They still have to enter in the Project Board, but those dates are different, and we don't have them right here.
So I scanned the list. I don't think there are any campus-based CE specialists on this call. This call is intended for academics with and/or merit and promotion purposes. So we'll get started. So the agenda is completely different. I threw away like 90% of the slides from last year. So I'm a little nervous about how this goes, but the feedback last year was a lot more demonstrations, a lot more examples directly from users. So lots of people contributed to training videos for this training. Thank you to all of you. And so we're going to spend the majority of the time going through a reporting checklist and demonstrations and Q&A. So, system highlights. This system was developed with lots of academic and administrative input. We had a Project Board Academic Advisory Committee. We still continue to get lots of academic input throughout the way. The idea is that it has a much more dynamic kind of reporting format. It's not as linear. You can kind of enter into Project Board from different and start entering information in different places. There is a search tool, which I'll hopefully have time to demo a little bit later. Some of you are less sensitive information, like activities, are searchable. And it was kind of cool in the middle of the year to do a keyword search for COVID and see a bunch of people actually entered in activities related to COVID. And yeah, so civil rights compliance reporting is very much integrated. It's not a separate system. With extension activities reporting, we'll demo that. We're always doing improvements and requesting for budgets, especially related to Interfolio and the dossier export. Hopefully this is our last year with Interfolio and we'll have something new next year. Another thing we heard, people really didn't like that archive button, so we've clarified it. It's now archive and delete. And some new features were added. People asked for the ability to export all of their data. So there's Excel and Microsoft Word exports now. So how do we use information? Like Mark said, federal report is a big one, get 8.5 million every year from the feds. We also contribute to UC accountability reports, UC Office of the President budget reports, sustainability reports. As you can imagine, there's always a lot of conversations at UC Office of the President about resource allocation and planning. Sometimes we're able to provide data related to your FTE and your efforts on helping inform those conversations. So every now and then we get some last minute legislative requests or external stakeholder requests. So we kind of drop everything and start mining Project Board with the data that you last entered. And of course, we need to use this for our multi-state and integrated FTE reporting. And for the last few years, we have been able to meet our targets for multi-state and integrated FTE. So we have not had to give back any of that special money allocated from the feds just for collaborations between AES and CE and multi-state. So thank you all for submitting your multi-state FTE in July. At a county director meeting, I heard Glenda give some kudos to academics. I quickly wrote it down and asked if I could share this with her, and I would share this with you all, and she said yes. And she said, kudos to you all for giving us these impact stories. So they're the last 2 years since Project Board's been around, we've been compiling these like 90-page impact stories of all of your outcomes from Project Board. And then we're able to use that 90-page document of lots of bullets of outcomes for different purposes. So she said, thanks to your work and the organization's work in developing the public values, we now have a straightforward, easy way to understand our impact. These are what capture stakeholders, lay audiences, legislators, and policymakers at all levels. They want to know what's in it for them. So every year we're getting more and more ad hoc requests from data from Project Board. So just so you know, when your data is going in, Strategic Communications is able to use some of the information for populating the focus area web pages, hero tiles, impact bars. Mark asked us this year to query the system for research and extension center outcomes, and he was able to put together a nice document of outcomes, measured outcomes there. Every now and then we get program teams and academics asking for information from Project Board to help identify people to collaborate with. So for example, there was a groundwater diversity, equity, inclusion request. So we sent some names on over, and also a request to identify who is not already with 4-H, but works in animal science and youth development. So yeah, the more information you get in, the more likely you might get picked up in one of these ad hoc requests. And lastly, we are using we are creating more ways to free the data and make the data more available to more people. So Chris Hansen from my team is on the call. Chris Hansen, shout out to you for helping with getting these county reports available for the last 2 years. And so every county gets a compilation of statewide program Project Board data, outputs and things like that, but also on the other pages, public value stories. So all of the outcome bullets that we were able to glean from you all get plugged into those. And people have said that people in the counties have told us that they could be helpful for sharing with county board of supervisors, for updating county websites, also for, I've heard, I think it was Luis Espino who sent the report to one of their state assembly members with a letter saying how they served the members of the residents of their district. So I'm really trying to make all of your efforts used as many ways as possible. So going into Project Board demo, logging in, the very first thing you'll want to do is log into ANR portal. If you haven't done that, please go ahead and log into ANR portal and make sure you have your device by you in case you get Duo. A lesson learned is that there's a bunch of employee ID numbers that show up here now, so I'm not screen sharing anymore, and I'm trying to remember to black that out. You might want to remember that too in case you're ever screen sharing on your portal. But the way to enter into Project Board is the widget on the right-hand side. Go to Project Board now. So a little bit first about the structure before we get into things. So Project Board is structured, like I said, where you can come into Project Board at any level. You can go in and you can just start writing your activities for federal fiscal year 2020. You can assign them to projects. We know that sometimes activities don't always belong to a project. Sometimes you get a one-off activity, so you can assign it directly to a theme. Projects are kind of like placeholders. I've heard from academics, and I think Tom said it in his presentation, that projects are for a lot of people align with their programs, a project summary table in their merit promotion. So they're really delineated by funding source. But I also know other people kind of have more broader level, higher level projects. So it's really up to you how you define your projects. Themes, we have designed those to align with the program summary narrative theme and thematic categories of the merit promotion. Those are really, really high level categories, and that's the place where you write your merit or promotion. And so, yeah, you can kind of tag things along as you go. You can tag them at the end of the year. But the idea is that every extension activity, every project is assigned to a theme. All right, so I'm going to go right into getting started. I know we have some newer folks, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on what to do if you are a new academic. Okay, so here's Project Board. And what I'm going to do is first show you where the user manuals are. So on the right-hand corner, there's a drop-down arrow. You'll see this lovely little menu, and you'll click on Help. This will take you to the Project Board Help page. Click on User Manuals. And you guys are what we call ANR Merit and Promotion users. You are all the different types of academics who go through ANR Merit Promotion. We used to call them just CE advisors, but more and more, there's a lot more titles. So we tried to be more inclusive this time around. So here's the user manual. I recommend if you're looking for something, just do a keyword search, hit Control F, you can start typing in words. I would not read it from top to bottom. Just go in for what you're looking for. But in the very beginning is an introduction. So if you're new to A&R, I would suggest reading the introduction. This is what Mark kind of went over a little bit already. Chris Hansen, I think you provided this using the system. You move between different screens by clicking on the blue links in the top menu. Remember, you have to click save anytime you're on a page before you leave it in order to make sure that information you entered in is saved. For any narrative section, any kind of open-ended field, you can cut and paste between Microsoft Word. And then there's lots of icons where you can hover over and get more information and tips. There's who to contact if you need technical assistance. I already showed you how to log in Portal, but I will mention that Firefox or Chrome are the two recommended browsers. They will for sure work if you use Firefox or Chrome. Safari and Edge sometimes work, but they're hit or miss. You can't be responsible for them. I'm going here right to getting started. So if this is your very first time ever going in a project board, you want to start here with getting started. The first step is to create clientele groups. And if you're creating clientele groups for the first time, I highly recommend you watch the October 13th training that David White, Mark Lagramini, and a bunch of others worked on. And so there's the recording, there's the PowerPoint, and the choose your own adventure examples. So there's, I think, 7 examples from 7 different cooperative extension employees on how to define clientele and report them in project board. So I really recommend, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, just watch those trainings, watch those examples. And then if you are an existing academic and you had clientele groups in the CASA system, there are some just notes here on how to clean up some of your project board that may have been imported from CASA. I won't go through every single one of them, but I think the main thing that I hear a lot from David White in our analysis every year is the big issue is people not archiving clientele groups that are not in use. So please, if there is a clientele group, there's duplicates and things like that, you really should delete them. Otherwise, David will think you're just not reaching them and you might get deemed out of compliance. Another thing you can do is just write a note in there somewhere. David does see all the field that says, hey, this one just wasn't active this year, but I don't want to delete it because, you know, they might be active next year. But just do something so that we know that it's not just an active group that you are neglecting to serve. So step 2 for brand new academics going into project board for the first time is to begin entering your themes, projects, activities. And there's some workflows here. What I've heard from brand new academics is that they like workflow 3. First, they start putting in their activities. Toward the end of the year, they review all their activities and decide, what are my themes? And then they enter themes into project board, and then they enter projects, and then they tag things after the fact. For people who have been around for a lot longer and have a standard set of themes for their program summary narrative, it is most efficient to actually do workflow 1. So you put in your program summary narrative theme names first. You don't have to fill in all the data, just put the names there at least. And then when you create a project and activity, those theme names show up under the drop-down menu so that you can click on it right away. So this one is the most efficient, but it is kind of better for people who've been around for a while and know what their themes are. And this workflow 3 is most preferred, I've heard from some newer academics. So I'll pause there because I see some questions in the chat. Deepa said, love workflow 1, thank you. And then step 3 for all academics, whether you're new or not, is to complete your annual reporting checklist. So these are the things that are brand new. I'll answer this question really quick. So Cindy Cron asked, what is the difference between activities and projects? This is a good question. In your program summary, in your merit and promotion, it's still there as examples, but they used to be a little more formalized. There's a project summary table that kind of lists like your projects, your grant funds, your, how those projects are being funded, who your collaborators are. So they tend to be, for some people, especially like in Tom Torini's example, more like the projects that get funding, distinct, unique funding. Whereas activities are the single things that you do within a project, like a meeting and a presentation, a research trial or something like that. So yeah, projects are a little bit higher level. They consist of multiple activities. Hopefully that answers your question. So the annual reporting checklist is something that was developed initially by some 4-H academics. Shout out to Emma and Stephen for helping with the first draft of this. And then I adapted it then for the NFCS folks. So 4-H and NFCS, you guys have like really specific reporting procedures because you have things like 4-H Online, WebMIRS, PAIRS, Master Food Preserver, BMS, whereas everybody else gets to just use Project Board, as far as I know, right? You guys have obviously grant reports and things like that, but there's no kind of consistent online statewide program system for other people who are in ag, natural resources, pest management, environmental, horticulture, water, etc. Normally, I would never lump you guys like that, but it's really just based on who has another statewide reporting system and who doesn't. So what I'm going to ask Lynn now to do is to please put in the chat the links to these 3 reporting checklists, just in case folks aren't actually on the help page since I'm demoing it. And so these 3 checklists live on Google Drive, just in case something happens and I need to update them. So it would be good to always kind of just make sure you're looking at the Google Drive version. If you don't start reporting today and finish today, you know, if you go back in December, there might be something a little bit different. So he put the links to the Google Drive. In case your Google Drive isn't allowing you to, or it's an open link, so you don't have to be logged into Google, but sometimes some people's computers don't allow them to. I don't really understand why. But I believe Clint is also going to post just the Microsoft Word files so that you can download them directly from the chat. So again, what you're doing is choosing your checklist and just taking a moment to open it and get yourself oriented. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and keep moving along here. And I'm gonna go ahead and just keep this in editor view because I think it'll just make my life easier.
Hey, Kit, Charles here. I have a question before you move on. With the 4-H, there's a section here that talks about extension activities and contact, and it says internal clientele already in 4-H online. There's some clarification perhaps that needs to be done to this instruction because I'm thinking some of the work that we are doing is not documented by 4-H online with our internal clientele, such as, for example, training for virtual training for successful virtual training for our volunteers right now. That's so not captured in the 4-H online.
Training for volunteers, is that something you consider as an extension activity or as a university service or public service activity?
That's an extension activity.
Okay, so it says there that you should be able to report the activity, but in the attendance field, you can just click internal and then write the total number of volunteers that attended. And I can work again with 4-H offline, but I worked on that with Stephen, and we did try to cover that specific scenario in those instructions. So, okay, everybody's looking at a slightly different checklist now. Oh, thank you, Keith. Nathaniel wrote in the chat that you may need to sign in with your Kerberos. That's your my.ucdavis sign in. And then if you click on the link again to Google Drive, then it should, or to the Google document, it should work. So I set it up so that anybody without having to sign in should be able to access it, but I think there's some other levels of security going on there. So hopefully by now you are very close to or already looking at your reporting checklist. And the similar thing of all 3 of these checklists is that there are 6 major components, 7 major components. There are basically 5 must-dos that you have to do every year by February 1st. You have to update your program's outcomes and impacts, outcomes that were observed during that federal fiscal year that we're reporting on. Clientele group baseline, you may not have to do something with clientele group baseline every year, Like you may want to revise it, you may want to not, but you should always at least be writing in some comments on your clientele group. Extension activities and contacts. So like I mentioned earlier, activity reporting and civil rights compliance contact reporting are all in one place now. Same with number 4, all reasonable effort. They're all activities that you do as part of your job. So they're all kind of streamlined in Project Board in one place. And the 5th thing everybody must do is update their publications, and not in Project Board. I'll show you, it's actually in the profile. So in your, I'll show you later. And then number 6 has some optional elements in Project Board. There were some changes to the merit promotion in the last couple of years, so these kind of transitioned to more optional elements. But they are still helpful if you are choosing to use the dossier export in Project Board. And I wanted to have tips at the top, but user feedback said to have tips at the bottom. And you know what? I'm going with what the users say this year. So for the focus of the rest of today's training, I'm going to focus more on your checklist items number 1, 3, and 5. I'll briefly, if there's time, I'm already behind time, so I already know I'm not going to really get to 2 and 4 very much, but we had entire whole trainings on just number 2 and 4. So at the bottom of your checklist are the links to those trainings. So I'm going to quickly move along here. So the first thing we are going to do is our first activity. This is, I think, our longest activity. So open your reporting checklist. Yes, and I'm purposely not having these in presentation mode because it's just going to be easier for me at this point because I'll be jumping around a lot. But thanks, I'll zoom in. So read section 1, program outcomes and impacts. Spend about 10 minutes reviewing one or more of the training materials provided. So these are brand new training videos that just got submitted by CE advisors in the last week or so. So I'm going to check my clock. It's 10:30 right now. I'll give you about 12 minutes total to work silently on your own on reading your reporting checklist and selecting one of those training materials provided. I think the 4-H and nutrition one, you only have one video option and it's from a natural resource person, but the content was similar. But the ag natural resource one, you have like 5 to choose from. So at 10:42, we're gonna come back together and I'll do a demo right down here. All right, it is 10:42. Hopefully you got to watch a training video, or at least most of a training video. What I'm going to do now is do a quick demo, and then we can have Q&A. So I'm going to, for an example, have my 2 screens up, and I'll show you the checklist on one side and Project Board on the other side. Oops. I don't know, I just learned this during the pandemic that if you drag a window off to the far edge of a screen, it'll snap. Oh, lovely. Okay, so for themes or outcomes, first thing you do is the description says to go to themes. So I'm going to do is click on themes in Project Board. And in your themes, if you're creating a brand new theme, you'll want to give it a name. It goes down to the very bottom. There it is. And then you click tap to edit. And here you can copy paste between your merit promotion dossier, your kind of issue statement or background, kind of justifying the work that you're doing. Or you can type it directly in here, either one. And then you can go here and click on, oops. And then click on methods, outcomes, impacts. And that's also where you can kind of type in directly or copy paste from your program summary narrative or other documents. Another recommendation is to, if you did a really great grant report and you have lots of measured outcomes, you can copy paste between grant reports in here. I just clicked on the chat, but I lost it. So if somebody, Clint, could read out the chat as things come up, that would be helpful. Oh, so let's see here. Like I mentioned, there's little eye icons where you can hover over and get descriptions of what you might want to enter into each of the field. So I clicked over this one, and this one says to enter for background, clientele, goals, and inputs, description of who you serve, the purpose, which an effort's directed, and what's invested: faculty time, staff time, students, infrastructure, funds, time, knowledge, etc. For methods, outcomes, impacts, I think this is mostly from the ebook, but you want to articulate your methods and the outcomes that were achieved during the reporting year. If you like, you can use project subheadings in this open narrative text field if you like. Refer to your project summary narrative table and extension activities. You don't need to repeat every single thing. You can kind of summarize it. For methods, you're going to be describing research, creative, and extension activities to reach your goals. You can also describe products and things like that. The outcomes is probably, in my opinion, the most important part. That's the part that we are mining for. That's the part that Glenda gave you all kudos for. Communication services is always looking for numbers like this too. And lots of people need this information. So really focus on your outcomes. And the outcomes, examples of those are changes in learning, like any attitude, knowledge, or skills that were gained as a result of participating in an extension activity. If you are able to measure changes in behavior or practice, that would be great too. If when possible, providing numbers, percentages, acres, or other units are always great. Also, changes in policy or decision making, and we're getting more and more of these because I think it's a matter of communicating to us and communicating in your merit promotion the changes in policy or decision making that you contribute to. Nobody ever feels completely comfortable taking full credit for a brand new policy that got put into place, a brand new pesticide that got registered, et cetera. But I wanted to note here, oh, look, I just found
Kit,
something.
there was a question from Gail as well.
Oh, sure, go for it. Can you read it out loud? I can't, for some reason, see the chat.
Yeah, she says, you mentioned to cut paste between your program summary, narrative, and themes. Is there a set of categories we're supposed to use?
Oh, that is a good question. Gail, I would actually look at, I know that Gail, you're new to the A&R merit and promotion process. You may want to look at examples of the program summary narrative that are provided on the AHR website. That might be helpful. And I think also if you watch the videos, there were some examples of how people provided names of their themes. So you might want to look at those too. So I'm going to pull up the 4-H, the nutrition checklist, because this last bullet, I actually need to add it to the 4-H one, but I wanted to really emphasize here that updating outcomes and impacts that happened during a reporting period are probably one of the most important things that you could do in Project Board and in your merit and promotion. And so you may want to update the method to tell us more about a specific outcome or impact. And so, for example, if you did an extension project 5 years ago, but the outcomes were only just now observed, like in July 2020, you still want to report that outcome. And you may, even though that method wasn't something you did that year, you'll want to remind the readers what method you did 5 years ago to connect that and make that kind of complete story. So hopefully that makes sense. Spend more time writing your outcomes and a little bit less time summarizing all your methods and outputs for the year. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because that was really disorienting. Thanks. I see Pam put in the chat. Actually, she sent it privately to me, so I'm going to resend it to everybody. Pam Tyson, Academic HR, put a link to all sample dossiers in the chat. So at this point, Quinn, can you run the poll? So I have a little pop quiz for you all. Please take a moment to complete the poll. The first question is, under which section of Project Board do outcomes get reported? Oops, I wrote reports, but I meant reported. A, activities, B, projects, C, themes, D, not sure. Number 2, true or false? In July 2020, a community partner told me about a major change to their work that happened as a result of a project I worked on with them back in 2007. Should I report this outcome in Project Board, true or false? I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. Going to share the results. So question number 1, under which section of Project Board do outcomes get reported? The correct answer is in C, themes, methods, outcomes, and impacts field. In the project's description field, you'll see in the reporting checklist down in the, I think it's in the tips section, that description field shouldn't be where you're making massive updates annually every year. It's kind of, projects become kind of static. You might just want to talk about what you're doing, what the goals are, what the inputs are, but you don't want to write your outcomes and impacts there. To kind of mirror the merit and promotion process, we are asking you all to summarize your outcomes in program summary, in your program summary narrative by theme. So that's how it is in your merit promotion. That's how we've designed it to be in Project Board. And definitely don't want to do it in your activities field, because that's where you're just describing, you know, your extension activities. You don't need to put your outcomes there. True or false? The answer to this one, should I report the outcome that I noticed or learned about in July 2020, even though the project I did was back in 2007? The answer there is true. Go ahead and share those outcomes when you get them. So we are, I'm gonna, like I mentioned, skip over checklist item number 2, clientele group baseline. Please read those instructions at some point, watch the October 13th training. There are some really, really great examples from like 7 different employees about how to do that. So if you need information, please watch those. Now skipping over to reporting item number 3, extension activities and contacts. So I'm going to spend a little more time here because this is one where we get a lot of questions and issues with reporting. So first, shout out to Keith Nathaniel for providing a new resource using observation to estimate group demographics. There's a lot of conversation and questions around how to do that. And so there's a 3.5-minute video there for you to watch. So take a few minutes to read section 3. I'm going to give you till 10:57. When we come back together, I'll give you a brief demo, and we're going to specifically talk about the COVID-19 guidance. We're not going to go into all the details that were covered on the November 2nd training. You can watch it on your own time, but I really wanted to spend some time calling out the COVID-19 guidance. So 3 minutes starts now. 10:57 is when we'll come back. All right, it is 10:57. And so the November 2nd training has really great examples, not only of how to improve your engagement with diverse audiences, but they almost all have really great demos of how CE advisors enter their contacts into Project Board. I think maybe one of them, I did it for them, but that one is a really great set of examples to watch if you're looking for how to report your contacts in a Project Board. So with that, I am going to do a really quick demo. So I again have one checklist on the left, Project Board on the right. To report activities and contacts, I go to activities. Scroll down here and then add an activity. And I always like to point out that when you hover over activities, the help text on the right side changes. So it gives you examples if you're wondering where to put things. The activities that require you to report contacts are all of the direct extension activity types here on the left, the top left menu. So meetings organized, train the trainer, educational presentations, ongoing collaborations, policy engagement, other activities, individual clientele contacts, These are all where you're kind of having live exchanges. I used to call them in person, but now we just call them live exchanges because they could be on Zoom, phone calls, things like that. And so you only have to report contacts for these types. I'll just walk through one that I know of, happens a lot. So this example here, I just clicked on educational presentation at a meeting, and the idea is that that meeting is organized by somebody else. You can put a description of the meeting name and the event in the first field, and enter in all this information. If you're using the dossier export, if you're one of those folks who's doing something different, like an annotated CV or something else for your tables for merit promotion, you can actually leave these blank. It says required for dossier. But I know lots of you are using the dossier export, so you'll want to fill this in so that when you do do a merit promotion in the future, all that information will be populated for you when you do your multi-year dossier export. So I'm going to scroll down to contact reporting. Contact reporting here assumes that you already have your clientele groups predefined already. So that was check with item number 2. So assuming that it's an external audience that is part of your clientele, you'll leave it on external audience. You'll click on clientele groups, select that clientele group, scroll down, and you can report your attendees by race or ethnicity, and by gender. And so one of the questions that we've gotten a lot, and we do have on the COVID-19 guidance, is if especially you are not in control of the meeting, you can't estimate or ask for the number of, ask for the demographics, the participants. You can use this prefer not to state or undetermined. It's just simply out of your control. You don't know how many people from each ethnicity, race, or gender group attended. So you can kind of just type in those and the prefer not to state or undetermined. I will say in typical years, it's highly recommended that you do not use this field. It's so weird that it keeps changing. It's highly recommended that you don't use this, that you do make your best effort to get demographic information from your participants. That's covered a lot in the civil rights compliance trainings that you can watch recording for, but the idea is here that we are trying to document that we are not discriminating against different types of demographic groups. And so let's see, that was one question that I get a lot. Another example I wanted to go through is one of these indirect extension types. So websites, blogs, social media managed, media outlet program interviews. The idea here is that you're kind of blasting these out. They're available for the public. The radio program is just putting it on the radio. You're not kind of really sending it, having like a live exchange with your clientele. So these two indirect extension activity types also count as all reasonable efforts. I'm going to go ahead and click here. So notice when I click on website, blog, social media managed, it's not a name, it's a description field. And I really encourage you all to use that description field to provide all the wonderful data that you might have. We always get the question of, hey, I got 1,000 followers. I made all these posts, and my social media account tracks all these interactions. Have like years of interactions data. Where do I put it all? And I always say, put it in the description field. If you put in the description field, it shows up in multiple queries of the system. It also populates your dossier export. So it'll have all that detail in there for you. Instant count, this one is a question that I get a lot. Do not list every individual blog or tweet, summarize it. For example, Twitter activity with 25 tweets, instance count is 25. So you wouldn't, you'd put if you wanted to put the number of posts that you had or tweets in a year, you could put that there. But things like interactions and followers and things like that, put that in the description field. I'll scroll down here and to the bottom. Notice that there's no attendance because we don't need you to report indirect extension contacts. But since it does count as an all reasonable effort, you can describe here if you did try to target any particular demographic group, especially the protected groups for, in this activity. Like say, for example, if you had something translated in another language you may want to call out specifically what languages or which groups were targeted because of that activity. So if you use those two activity types, they'll populate your dossier export, we count them, they show up in queries, and they count against your all reasonable effort. So I'm gonna go over to the checklist now and scroll down to the very bottom where it says COVID guidance. It is a Word document. It's available on the front page of Project Board. I think we sent it out sometime over the summer, but I want to just spend some time going over it again because it is a weird year. So I'll just go over the main headings here. Please call out your COVID-19 work, any particular new activities or outputs that you have done. There's a lot of how-to sections in this document. There's also a reminder here to do publications. Civil rights compliance reporting is still expected. We know that it's challenging, that you might not have reliable demographic information, but you should still report the total number of attendees when you can as undetermined race or demographic, race, ethnicity, gender groups. So repeating that a little bit. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on ARE, but this table here is more specific to reporting your extension activities and your contacts. So it's a little repetition from the previous meeting, but I think this is important given the time. So Instagram Live. So I want to really make sure I differentiate here. Your Instagram posts, your Facebook posts, your tweets are not live. They're posts that you put out and the public sees or your followers see. When you go live on something, that's like you putting your video on, people are like coming and interacting with you through the chat and things like that. So when you're doing Instagram, social media, Twitter posts, those are indirect extension. But when you do live, those can count as a direct extension activity because there is kind of a live exchange sort of happening. And so you'll want to track, I think some feeds, like the numbers disappear after 24 hours. So if you do a live stream, you want to make sure you quickly capture your max number of contacts and report those contacts as undetermined. You'll still want to, of course, report those for your merit promotion. There's a little more how-to there. So Zoom webinars and meetings, again, those are live exchanges with people. You can see them, you can hear them, you can get their feedback from the chat. So when you're trying to report contacts for Zoom meetings, you should be able to get a report from the host to see the total number of unique unduplicated meeting participants there were, and you should report those contacts. And when you do that, we do recommend that you try to get demographic information either through an anonymous poll or through sending out a survey. ANR does have a template of what those survey questions could look like. And a lesson learned from Michigan State, who's really kind of a leader these days in DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion related work and extension, is to just take a moment to build that relationship with your clientele and let them know why it's important that you're getting them, that you ask them, that they complete forums about demographic information. Let them know that we need to document that we're not discriminating, that we're serving all Californians. And they said, Michigan State said that taking that time to build that relationship has helped improve response rate.
Kit, a question came in from Cindy.
Cool.
I'm hosting a seminar and have asked for people registering to self-identify. If they chose not to answer the question, should I report that they chose not to reply, or should I try to determine race or gender by their name?
In that case, it's up to you. Ideally, when you're using observation to estimate a group, you're looking at a group, looking at a name is a little bit tricky. The safer probably side is to go ahead and report them as undetermined. But another way to look at it is you're looking at a list of names and you're trying to make your best observation of the names of, what percentage of that group of names is, what gender they are, what race they are, what ethnicity, but it's really hard to do by just doing names. So I'll just probably I'd probably land on reporting them as undetermined. Yeah, so I think running low on time, but please take a moment to read these. If you have any questions about your COVID-19 activity and contact reporting. So again, with all reasonable effort, I'm not going to take a lot of time. There is a training that you should watch and also look at the examples from CE advisors on that all reasonable effort training. Publications, this is one that I haven't covered at all this year, so I want to take a few moments for that. For publications, you go to your profile. Let me show you this. So first you go to your profile or your portal, and on ANR portal on the left side is edit your profile. Once you get to your profile, click on bibliography, not biography, which everybody always, they look so close, but click on biography. And you can add new citations for the federal fiscal year manually. And the reason why there's these peer-reviewed, non-peer-reviewed different drop-downs is to match up with your merit and promotion categories. And so, yeah, you'll want to kind of select if it's peer-reviewed, is it a scholarly journal publication or other? Is it non-peer-reviewed? And what type of non-peer-reviewed? Type in as much information as you can. You can also, if you have a particular citation format you like, you can copy paste it from your own bibliography into here. But you still, even if you do this part, you still have to fill in the field above, unfortunately. And the benefit of, people always ask, why aren't publications in Project Board? And the benefit of having the bibliography in the profile is that it'll actually show on your public profile. When anybody on Google searches you and find your ANR profile, by you submitting these citations to us, you're also putting them on your profile. You also have the ability to hide it in case you don't want it on your profile, but I feel like most people want to increase the visibility of their publications. And there is an export here. So I mentioned, we tried to map it up to merit and promotion categories. So you can retrieve here and it'll give you a Microsoft Word document and it'll have some really awesome formatting for you for your merit and promotion. All right, so optional elements in Project Board, that's number 6, and tips for organizational reporting. I did want to spend a little bit of time going over these. So for fun, I'll switch over to somebody else's. I'll go to the non-4-H, non-NFCS checklist. And I'm scrolling down to the very bottom where it says optional elements in Project Board. So only, like I mentioned, in the last couple of years, the merit promotion process has changed. The ebook has changed a little bit. So whereas before there were like really prescriptive tables for all of these, university public service, evidence of professional competence. Now the ebook says you don't have to follow those tables. You can do something else if you wish. And so given that guidance, we decided to make it align with it because that's what we're always trying to do is align Project Board with your merit and promotion. You can choose not to enter these into Project Board. And again, I know that some of you really enjoy using the export because it keeps everything in one place. It spits it out into a nice template. So if you are using the dossier export for your merit promotion, you will want to enter these in. Let's see. And this extension activity delivered by your staff or volunteers, I've heard conversations about this, that it's really recommended that you don't list every single activity that the staff and volunteers that you supervise deliver. It might be better to summarize these in your program summary narrative, but there are some cases where you, depending on the type of position you have, like this activity type is actually really important for you. So for example, I know in UC Syrup for Gale, you guys have a lot of staff and volunteers. There's no other reporting system for their contacts to be reported into, like 4-H Online or WebNears or PAIRS. And so, and the only other way for us to get UC Serap's contacts is if one of the UC Serap academics adds an extension activity delivered by our staff or volunteers and provides the numbers. So that's kind of one example of why you'd want to use that. But for folks who are with 4-H or any of the nutrition, family, consumer science programs, you know, these contacts are already being reported in another system. You can describe the activity in your program summary narrative. It really might not be worth it to go in and do all this. And I'm thinking other programs, like there's the Master Composter program, there's the Farm Smart program, you know, there's lots of other county-based programs where there's no reporting system that things are getting reported into. So if you supervise one of those programs and you know their contacts aren't being reported anywhere else, please consider reporting them using this type. Tips for organizational reporting. Please do not archive or delete anything. It's meant to compile information over several years, mostly for the benefit of you for your multi-year dossier exports. It is a good practice to make activities fall with, if you're using the range feature, have them fall within one federal fiscal year. Use the copy feature to clone activities and modify them with new information for the future. And I've mentioned this already, but once you establish your projects, don't spend a lot of time updating the description every year. Really spend a lot of your time focusing on those outcomes and public values in your theme section, as well as reporting your activities in ARE. FTE, that's on a separate, FTE is a section project board that you'll see in the top menu, but you don't have to do that for the February 1st due date. Call for FTE reporting goes out every May with a due date of July 1st. It's a totally different reporting timeline because we use it for a totally different purpose. And then again, there's all these training resources below. So with that, I'm going to ask Lynn if you would be willing to share the second poll. So the two polls are mostly about activities. The first question, scenario 1, a partner asked me to present on a Zoom meeting. The attendees are considered part of my defined individual type clientele group. The partner didn't capture any demographic information. Which response best describes how to report it? And the options there, report it using presentation at a meeting, report it using with no attendance. B is report it using presentation at a meeting and use report attendance as undetermined. The third option is reported as evidence of professional competence activity. D is not sure. Scenario 2 is I have a very active social media account. I made 200 posts, 500 interactions, 1,000 new followers. Select one response that best describes how to report it. One is using the website social media managed. The second one is report it using individual clientele contacts. The third is use a mass media activity type. Sharing the results. So the first scenario, the answer that I thought was the best way to capture this information in Project Board was in fact B, the one that most of you chose, which is to report the contacts, but use the undetermined demographic boxes under presentation at a meeting. That way we at least still get your numbers for which then get populated into the county report, the federal report, and all annual report and all those things. And so A works, you can do that, but then that means it's numbers that we're not able to count if you leave it blank. And C, it's technically okay if you do report it as the evidence of professional competence activity, but I think the key there is that since it is part of your client, the audience was part of your clientele group, you should probably report it as an extension activity. So yeah, all three were okay, but the best one I would say is B. Scenario 2, the answer that I thought was the best way to report it in Project Board is also A, which is what most of you picked. Use the website social media. If you do that, it populates your dossier export. It gives you credit as doing, managing a social media account. If you report it at, it's not really a B at all because it's not really a live exchange with people. Some people may debate that a little bit, but I think, you know, having a post is different from having a live interaction via like video camera and chat. And then C, mass media ARE type, that one works. It's totally okay. The only thing there is that if you do that, it won't populate the dossier export in your other extension activity table. So thank you for completing that poll. I think I would like to go over one of the questions that Cindy posted in the chat and open it up to other people on the call. What are the pros and cons of using the dossier export? Why would I choose to use it or not use it? Feel free to unmute yourself and chime into Cindy's question.
So I know for me, I'm considering doing an annotated CV, mostly because some grants do require CVs, especially like some of the larger grants. And so I figured I'm going to use that. I'm probably going to go that route instead of the program dossier export route, just because that way I have a CV ready to go if that were the case. Because I had a grant we applied for and they wanted a CV and I was like, I got to update it really fast.
Thanks, Liliana. Does anyone else want to chime in on pros and cons of using the dossier export?
Cindy, my name's Michelle. I'm a farm advisor. I don't use the export. I'm often writing things throughout the year. And so it's kind of easier for me to just have my Word documents of my narrative kind of ongoing as I'm doing things. And then I just put it into Project Board later on.
Thanks, Michelle. And I see Carl responded in the chat. I don't, it's easier to do things on Excel where I can jump between activities and themes without having to navigate the website. So then I'll just ask a follow-up question, Carl, for your merit promotion. Are you submitting an Excel sheet? And while he's responding, does anybody else want to chime in? Okay, so I'll just share just a few examples that I've heard along the way from people who do like the dossier export. The chat. I use the dossier and just copy paste between Project Word. Okay. I know that for some folks who've been around for a long time and have always used the table format in their merit promotion, they want to continue using the table format for their merit promotion, and the dossier export helps provide them the latest template. So I think that the template is probably the biggest pro that I've heard for using the dossier export. All right. Yeah, lots of copy pasting going on. So hopefully that was helpful, Cindy. And maybe other people will still weigh in. Yeah, Gail said, if we can get the template, if it is completely blank, can we use it to figure out the sections? Yes, you can. So yeah, folks like Gail who are newer to the A&R merit and promotion process, sometimes starting with a completely blank slate is intimidating and overwhelming. And so having the template can be helpful in that case. All right, so a couple last things. And yes, project board is mainly used for A&R reporting, yes. And those 5 things on the checklist are the 5 things that you must do for annual reporting every year. And so in order to meet your reporting requirements, if you get just these 5 bare minimum things done, then you'll meet your civil rights compliance requirements, you'll meet your A&R reporting requirements. And then all those optional things you can leave blank if you're not using the dossier export. So that was kind of the main takeaway there. I did want to share, I think David White's on the call. David, feel free to chime in if you like, but these are some lessons learned about civil rights compliance. So again, delete any clientele groups that are duplicates or no longer active for you. If you have an organizational clientele group type, you still have to report contacts against it, and I've demoed how to do that. And you must report at least one of at least 3 of the 4 ARE types to be considered in compliance by ARE. So please attend the ARE or watch the ARE training if you haven't already for that. And so I did want to show you all this lovely, oops, Explorer feature, which all of you should have access to. So when you click on the benefit of this is we were thinking, especially in terms of newer folks who are looking for collaborators or program team leaders who are coming up with lists of people for certain projects or certain industry people are asking for, expertise. You can use this Explorer feature to search on the kind of less sensitive data in project board like activities. So I just deleted all these tags. Your tags auto-populate, but depending on what you've tagged yourself in project board, but I deleted all of them, and I'm going to do a keyword search on COVID. And loading, it shows here that about a month ago, Amanda Linares, Marissa Coyne, Carolyn Ryder entered in some activities related to COVID. Another one that might be relevant is wildfire. So about a month ago, Tracy, Fadzi, Beatrice, Nick entered in some information about wildfire. So the idea here is you can't click on it, you can't get more information. The idea is just to give you a snapshot of who can I contact. So the idea is that you maybe look them up in the directory, give them a call, and talk to them more about it. And then if you need to do even more like intense queries of project board, like you want to see query other fields, you can always contact program planning and evaluation, and we can help you with that. And just to recap, this was a system built for multiple purposes. So again, there's the dossier export, there's outcomes reporting, advocacy. We hope that collaboration can be facilitated with the system. And of course, civil rights compliance. So with our last 2 minutes, and we will stay on, I would love to hear any actions that you might take as a result of taking this training, any improvements that you might have for me for the training for next year, and any feedback in general. So please feel free to unmute yourself and contribute or use the chat. I'm also going to put in the chat a feedback form, anonymous feedback form. We always appreciate when you guys give us feedback. I do read them, and I do take a moment to improve my trainings from them. So there's the feedback form. And while you're giving us feedback and completing the form, here are some additional people to contact, places to go if you need information. The examples and in the polls were helpful. That's good to know. We'll try to do more of that. Thanks, Marissa. And with that, we are at the end of this meeting, so we can go ahead and adjourn, and recording can stop. And a few of us will try to stay on and provide any additional technical assistance that you guys might need. Thank you for attending.